think it's a given, and I think we accept it, most reluctantly accept, that David Moyes will be West Ham manager until the end of the season. Unless it's a horrendous disaster and we lose the next 4 or 5 games in the spin, I think David Moyes will be here to the very end of the season. Now, we don't know where that's going to take West Ham. We don't know whether we're going to be playing Premier League football, and we don't know whether we're going to be lifting the Conference League trophy. Nobody knows. It's all speculative. We don't know. It's all opinions, and we're just saying, well, look, and this is all I'm doing here, giving opinions. Now, one thing that's interesting about this, though, is that David Moyes' position, whether we do stay up or whether we go to whatever happens, is under threat. There's no choice about it. I think even if West Ham were to survive the Premier League season, let's say, and not win the Conference League, I don't know whether that'll be enough to keep him his job. I really don't. I mean, there's even talk of people saying, I mean, Dave Walker was saying on the podcast, even if David Moyes was to keep West Ham and win the Conference League, he still would get rid of David Moyes and feel that he's brought him to, he's taken the club as far as he can. And he might well have a good point there. He might do, and maybe that's where the club are thinking. Who knows? But I think that a lot of us can agree that he's on thin ice whatever happens now. I think he's lost a lot of trust amongst the fans and even probably within the club this season because of the general, how bad we've been in the league. It has been very poor. And this, as we've said on this channel loads and loads of times, it's not just this season. Last year in general, 2022 was really poor. This year hasn't been great, has it? Let's be honest. But we are trying to battle a relegation now. That we get that. I think we need to just forget all that for the time being and just focus on these games. I do think that. And that's why I just want to kind of keep this point what I want to talk about today, which is Will Still. Now, Will Still's he's been given a lot of attention recently in the media. It's a bit of a romance story, isn't there, regarding Will Still, in the fact that he's a young manager at Reims, and he's doing very, very well in France. Now, one thing that's interesting with Will Still is that he is his background in terms of the fact that he's come through this whole, football manager route, which I believe actually he's been taken a little bit out of context. He is studying the game. He does understand. He clearly knows what he's doing. He's a good manager. There's no two ways about it. His history is pretty decent. He's doing very, very well at the moment. And he's actually someone I'm keeping an eye on personally. I really do think he looks very, very good. Now, one thing's very interesting about Will Still, which I'm noticing quite a lot, is he's doing a lot of talking. He's saying things very, very publicly. He's basically putting himself in front of West Ham and saying, I will take that job as far as I'm concerned. And the reason I say that is because of a few comments he has made in recent weeks. Now, I'm just going to go and tell you what he said. Now, he was asked in a recent interview about managing in England and what he felt about leaving France, coming to England. Now, if you look at his history, I think he was born in Belgium originally. He is from England, but that's where he was born and whatnot. So he spent a lot of his time abroad. He speaks fluent French. I think he speaks Italian possibly as well. He speaks English. Very, very clever guy. Now, one thing he said was, England always feels like home and somewhere I want to go back to. It's part of me, part of my roots, my family. It's part of who I am. Now, again, okay, fair enough. But again, that to me is him shouting, I want to go back to the Premier League. And then he was asked in a separate interview about his thoughts on managing the Premier League. Let me just go into this. He said, bear with me a second. If you ask any kid what they'd want to do, they'd all say, I want to be a Premier League footballer or a Premier League manager, and I'm no different. He was then asked a direct question about West Ham's the position, and he just said in response, I'd have to think about it. Now, for me, this is Will Still. Really, he's doing everything he can to put himself in the shop window to West Ham, saying, look, let's be honest, it would be a huge step up for his career. He clearly wants to manage the Premier League, and the fact he's a huge West Ham fan, I mean, West Ham fans would take to that massively, massively. I mean, we all love someone that's one of us, I personally would be very excited by it. He was then asked about his family history because I think there was talk about him, there's been this talk about him being a West Ham fan. And again, he was asked, I think this was by Sky Sports, and he said, yes, the rumours are true. I'm a West Ham fan. My dad is a West Ham fan and it runs in our family. Now, I think this is certainly one to keep an eye on. We put out an article recently. This is what I'm actually reading these quotes from here. And I did speak to XWH employee. He will provide updates on this. He will provide updates. Now, what has happened regarding West Ham and Will Still, this is where it is at the moment. As far as I understand it, from what X has reported on our Patreon, and what is reported on our website as well, is that West Ham are monitoring Still's progression in the game. So again, doesn't really mean a lot. Doesn't really mean anything. I mean, but it's interesting. It's certainly interesting, and one I think West Ham fans should all be keeping an eye on. Now he's obviously doing very well where he is. I think he's just come off the back of a 17-game unbeaten run, which I think was the best at the time in Europe, and all these things, which is pretty impressive. But their owner has come out. The president of the football club has come out and made it very clear that he is not available. I really hope, given his work, his performances, and given his human qualities, that he will remain coach of Reims, said their president. So they obviously don't want to lose him, and rightly so. You can understand that. But it does, I think, add more pressure to David Moyes. I mean, Will Still has come out and said as well, I mean, I didn't quote this actually, but he did come out before and say about David Moyes and saying it would be disrespectful to talk about the West Ham job. David Moyes is there and I hope he does very well. He's a massive West Ham fan, so I'm sure he does hope David Moyes does very well. But at the same time, he'd want that job. As far as I'm concerned, he'd want that job. If we went in and said, well, we want you as manager, I think he would bend over backwards to make it happen. It's one to keep an eye on. That's all I'm saying. I'm very interested, though, to know what people think of this guy, because me personally, I'd have him. I really would. I love I mean, I've seen clips of him talking to his team in training. I know people say, yeah, so what? You know, it doesn't really mean anything. But he's impressive. If you can go online and find some clips of Will Still talking to his team, it's really impressive. He comes across very, very well. Very, very likeable guy. Massive West Ham fan. I mean, that's really all what we want, isn't it? So, yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. So let us know your thoughts.